Hello, David McMillan here. Late at night, not much to watch, nobody really to listen to. Well, a while back I did a piece on fear, and tonight I thought I'll say something about doubt, how we don't know much about anything, and secrets aren't kept, and when we do find out the difficult things, it all depends on just calculations. Yeah, sound like a bit of a dreamy subject? Okay, well, listen anyway. See what you think. Or drift off to sleep. Either way, you'll get something out of this. Hello, David McMillan here. Former smuggler, giving some ideas from my experience in the smuggling days as they might apply to today. And today, in particular, our reaction to fear and the unknown. In particular, doubt. In these early months of 2020, we've had a huge amount of information being poured out upon us from all streams. But that information is not being given always as fact, but as opinion, as advice, a lot of uncertainty in it. And of course, I had to deal with that a great deal when smuggling contraband. And I bring this up because I knew certain things were probably true. I did research on other things that I thought to be true, and they were divided into two streams. What I knew of human beings and how we behave, and what I knew of the facts on the ground, the material, the objects, the technicalities. These things had to work together for any successful operation, and of course there was the possibility of arrest, massive sentences, and even death behind it, so it took on a great importance. One of the primary things that concerns people is uncertainty, and there's not much consolation given when people are constantly saying, well, I may be an expert, but these are the unknowns. This is a theory. That's not helpful at all. In the same sense as, back to my old career, today we face the possibility of death, even though it's quite small. Of course, really 1 in 100,000, perhaps less. After all, in the UK, 600,000 people die every year from one cause or another. And so far, and I speak of May of 2020, some 25,000 people are known to have died from COVID-19. But where does that leave you about facts? I should say that what we humans are best at is assessing other human beings, their behavior, what they're likely to do, and how to dismiss what is really the smokescreen of conversation and talk, of promises and empty ideas, of hopes expressed in various ways, and attempts to mislead you. You can see through most of that. I certainly became quite good at it when assessing people over the front line in source countries where I had to deal with people who were often either desperately poor or desperately ambitious, and certainly ruthless. Could I work through that minefield without getting killed, to get what I wanted, to safely get out of the country? What was the team like that I had together? Were they reliable? Would they do as instructed, as advised? How close did I have to keep to them? What would I have to watch for? These all deal with understanding things, removing doubt, and perhaps something of this will help remove any doubts you might have, or perhaps at least remove the fear of worrying about those doubts and just leave them as unknowns. So what do you know? Nature has given us our senses, and through them our ability to judge things, particularly obvious things, what's good to eat, where it's good to hide, how to use our hands to change the shape of things to our advantage. But more than that, the human species has soared to the point of absolute control over the other animals on the planet by being able to judge each other and be better competitors against each other. So that's where we really shine, if that's what you want to call it, in understanding the failings of others. For example, it could be argued that even the ability to speak had a greater advantage to us in misleading our competitors. Of course, it's a great thing. We are able to speak to our children and teach them things. We're able to help our friends by giving them advice. But did that help us become dominant? Did that help our ancestors? No, I suspect that that ability was more often used to mislead, to say to your competitor, well, if you go over the hill there's a fine set of trees with some delicious fruit. Whereas, in fact, over the hill, there was a pride of lions, very hungry, who would tear your competitor to pieces. That speech advantage would also be good, I guess, in passing on your genes by telling fibs to somebody you were courting, especially misleading the alpha competitor in the pack or the group, reassuring him, getting him to go out hunting, while you stayed back in the camp and looked after the women folk. Looked after them all right. So speech is a double-edged sword. It's provided great advantage, but I'm not sure that its primary purpose is all that altruistic. So we know that much. That's one of our prime facts, not to take speech on case value. Yet, here's where we fall down as clever little creatures. We're just not very rational, and there's good reason not to be. When you see something threatening coming towards you, you don't want to sink into a debate with your peers about whether the intentions are good or bad, whether that spear coming towards you is really deadly, whether you're going to be outnumbered by the group that's attacking. You survived, your ancestors survived because they simply reacted, and that reaction was trustworthy. But of course, it's usually not factually correct. It just wins on the numbers. More often it keeps you alive, even if you're misjudging, because you're running in the other direction. You're holding your hands up. You've hit out first rather than be struck. But let's find an example of irrationality at work. We like to think we're lucky. We like to think somehow we're, as individuals, somehow chosen ones, that, well, I wouldn't be alive today if there wasn't some destiny, some purpose for me. It's all a lot of nonsense, but it goes to the gambler in us, and we bet on lottery. Now, the lotteries are all, most of them, done by some numbered balls being caught up in a machine. They're caught up, well, due to various simple forces, but pretty much at random. Random enough anyway, so that the outcome can be just as equal for one ball or another. But we have a lot of prejudices. Sure, we take numbers that are special to us, that have some meaning to us, and we will always believe that what we see as random numbers, I don't know, 17, 23, 42, 8, 11, they're more likely to come up than the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, even though mathematics tell us that they're just as likely. But which ticket would you want? The first lot of numbers I suggested, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? Well, you're not going to take the second set, are you? that prejudice will be at play. But let's take a closer look. This egg is kind of like a ball, and it'll do. And I don't know, egg is a good metaphor in a sense. So has this got just as good a chance as, say, another egg of coming through in your lottery? Well, sure, you say. There's nothing particularly different. One could go in, one might not be. But let me make a minor change to it. I'll put a number on it. Here we are. That's number 7. Has that got a better chance than the egg with nothing? Well, no, you go along with that. It could go either way. But here's the point. It doesn't make any difference what I write on this egg. They still both have an equal chance. Now, if I put a different symbol, does that make any difference? Will that have a better chance of going in? No, of course not, it doesn't. So why is it then? Why is it that we don't like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7? What does it matter what markings we've put on those balls? Does that suddenly change everything? But you're not going to shift, are you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 just is unlikely compared to 11, 23, 14, 32. You just won't shift. That irrationality, that association with the entire world within your perception of it, with those things you've imposed on it, that bit of scribble you put on that egg or that lottery ball, that's everything. Oneself. Irrational. I work with electronic cameras, and that's my early training as an electrical engineer. And in a sense, I never quite got the feel for the things I can't see. I work with them. I know the numbers. I know how it all comes together. But I don't have that innate sense that I have of a rock or blinding sunlight. I accept these things to be true, what I know of electrons. But it's so difficult when I can't see. And you know how much easier it is if you can really see things. But we must accept what the maths tells us, but also what it can't. Now, when we look at people put forward as experts and we see them stumbling, we see them talking about unknowns, it's a little unsettling. We like to think there is somebody in control. And I expect that's why we think that conspiracy theories have got so much strength in them. Because, likely or not, it's comforting, isn't it, to think that somehow, somewhere, even if it's a dark force, somebody is in control, somebody knows what he or she is doing, and that it's not all just a bunch of half-wits stumbling around like blind ants or termites, somehow putting together their little societies, and our big human one, not really knowing what they're doing. And it is unsettling. One of the great ambitions of artificial intelligence is to build a machine that understands what it's being told, not just the reactive type, such as Siri or Alexa or Hey Google. No, the device behind that just matches a bunch of words with other likely responses. Sure, the algorithm allows it to refine so that the odds of its collection of words that it gives back to you are a better match. But it doesn't have the understanding that we as human beings have, because we're able to run two machines in our brain at once, which are constantly comparing things. And winnowing out the useful information. And this is such a complex process. Yet, I mention this because science's ambitions are so much greater than the current abilities. One of the conspiracy theories holds that the COVID-19 illness comes about because the virus itself was engineered to make us sick. Other theories go beyond that. Not that it was simply a bioweapon, and as a bioweapon, COVID-19 is not particularly good. It simply doesn't make enough people sick or debilitated or dead. I mean, a death rate of, one in many, many thousands is no kind of a weapon. But the other idea that it somehow is a mind-altering virus, that it's targeting particular behavior of ours. Now that's an interesting one. Could you have a virus that makes you behave in a different way, to behave against your will? And I brought this up because I just want to say the technical challenge is really something to behold. To take a strand of coding and apply it to our cells, to make those cells, well, start firing off our synapses, to put thoughts in our head. And we can look no better than at a little worm in nature. Leucochloridium is a worm and one of my favorite near-invisible worms. It has a life cycle. No, it just doesn't have babies in the earth as little larvae, and they grow up and eat stuff and reproduce down there. No, it's somehow got tangled up in a much more complicated thing. Its little eggs live in bird shit, and they're kind of waiting for, as much as eggs ever wait for anything, for a snail, often particular kinds of snails, to come along and munch it up as the snail eats other things. It has a way of making that bird shit seem quite tasty, which is a job in itself. So the snail eats the little would-be eggs. Then it gets extraordinary. This tiny worm sits in what I'll call the liver of this snail, and then starts to pump out lots of little worm embryos, and they move up towards the eye stalks of the snail. Yeah, they get into the eye stalk, sometimes both, but one will do, often as not. And those little embryos change form and change the form of the eye stalk. In fact, they make it swell and grow and take on colours and even give it a kind of pair of eyes so that it looks like a caterpillar, tasty to a bird. And this is necessary for our worm friend and our worm friend's babies. Now, the snail, which doesn't really like to come out in daylight because it's dangerous, it changes its behaviour. It will climb out into the open and onto the end of a leaf where it's a perfect target for a passing bird of prey. Not a big vicious eagle, but usually the small ones. And they will look down and see a shape in their little retina that looks like a tasty caterpillar on the end of a leaf. Of course, it's just one of the eye stalks of this zombie snail. The bird comes down, munches it up, and certainly takes the eye stalk. That gets swallowed, ends up in the bird. Various life stages of the worm take place in there, gets pooped out again, snail eats it, becomes a zombie, it goes through. But here's the really astonishing part. Somewhere in this process, there is not only changing the shape of a snail, a part of it, the eye stalk, into something to look like a a mimicry of another creature, in this case a tasty caterpillar. But there's something in there going on that makes the snail behave against its will, against its own little programming. If in human terms it would be like some kind of a virus that would get into us and affect our cells in such a way that it would go into our brain and make us do specific things, not just go nuts or froth at the mouth or dance around in circles, but go to particular places and behave in a particular manner. In what way and for how? Who knows? Would it be possible to engineer a virus to do such a thing? Well, let's go back to leucochloridium, a parasitic, aggressive mimicking worm. The mechanism that makes that snail behave differently is quite unknown. When I say unknown, it knows what it does, but precisely which bits of the cells involved are making what bits of DNA, what chemicals they're secreting, how they're so particular, how and what parts go onto the brain of the snail, unknown. The overall mechanism for such things is also unknown because it's so damn complex. It's as though you've opened up 10 million pocket calculators and got every transistor out, and you've got a bunch of wires and connecting them together. You have no real idea what result you're going to get. For somebody to manufacture a virus is not difficult at all. But to know what it's going to do when it gets into another cell, sure, you can do that by putting it in a cell and seeing what happens. But to be able to predict it, to engineer it to several levels, is effectively impossible for us to do at the moment. Of course, it would have some use indirectly. The ability to put things into our central nervous system that would trigger particular neurons would be very helpful in medicine, particularly treating mental illness, but also for more routine things like pain relief. Imagine having a electronic patch that could fire off certain neurons in your head, sort of not just trigger our endorphins, but mimic endorphins by sending signals to the right place. Also good for controlling immune reactions, suppressing them, for fevers, for almost everything, if programmed correctly. But still so very far away. To imagine that somewhere in some laboratory, mad scientists are manufacturing these things, mind-altering viruses. What, manufacturing such a thing and ignoring the potential to be trillionaires because of the medical applications of the very same thing that the conspiracy theorists think is going on? Well, if half a lifetime spent underground and smuggling and being ruthless has taught me anything, nobody forgoes an opportunity. Nobody passes on a great chance to become rich. So if such a thing could be successfully funded, it would be, and the results would be plain because it would be no secret. There would be profits to be made, and they would be made. Certainly, can you think of any development that has ever been found that hasn't been used for profit? What, manipulate people? And to do what exactly? I suppose that's another point. The manipulation of people to Well, the traditional one is, well, it placates the masses, it stops the rebellions, it keeps us as taxpayers and honest citizens and law-abiding and all that nonsense. Well, we're not particularly law-abiding, it's just that we don't like going to prison. Only serial risk takers like I was, I hope not to be, ignore all that and get too curious and think, no, I'll behave like that snail and climb out on the leaf today, see what eats me. It's not good. But no, mostly we go along willingly into the things that some people fear are being programmed into us. It's easy to shake off, and I think we would know if we were being programmed. Or maybe not. I once had an idea that some virus or bit of mind programming by aliens made them invisible to us. So the aliens are living amongst us, but they've got into our heads and we simply don't see them. Not only that, when they appear in our photographs and on our various sensing equipment, we're also programmed to ignore that. Rather difficult when a lot of AI machine processing deals with the data, but I put that aside for the moment. What really put a hitch in this one was that I couldn't think what the motive would be for the aliens to program our minds. Is it like that old, what was it, Twilight Zone story, to serve man? It wasn't a servant, it was, well, it's a bit of a killer on the plot of this one, but it was to serve up to eat. Do the aliens eat us? I don't think they'd have to go to all of that trouble just to keep us breeding. And not only that, the fact is it's nonsense. The amount of money it would have cost the aliens to get here, I'm sure they could get a feed back at home for a trillionth of the cost. No, we really do have to look to motivation. Any good conspiracy theory worth a pinch must survive the test of rationality, and the prime test is economic viability. Can the conspirators, can the manipulators get the same result that they're aiming for without going to all that trouble? And what is it exactly they want? To make profit? Well, it's so much easier than having to go to so much fuss with fiddling with people's heads. World domination? Who wants it? And when you break it down, every society is composed of individuals, and those individuals want individual things. They want their personal happiness. They might be greedy, but it's their personal greed, and they have levels of satisfaction. Who's currently on? Oh, yes, Bill Gates is currently unpopular. Well, he's a bit of a predictor of things. You've got to shoot that messenger. I've been shot many a times as a messenger myself. But I never got rich like Bill Gates. But what would be his motive? What economic sense would be it for him? Or even, who's another villain of big money? George Soros, the financier and big fund speculator. Manipulating the markets? No, you certainly you can take advantage of it, but it makes more economic sense, just in terms of your own energy consumed, to predict what will happen anyway, rather than to make it happen. Wasn't there? It was old Goldfinger in James Bond was going to irradiate a significant portion of the world's gold so that his unirradiated gold would have greater value. It was a bit lame because the target was Fort Knox and there's really not much gold there. I don't think there was even in 1963, let alone now, which is surprisingly very little. But here's the point. Old Goldfinger could have spent his money more wisely and just foreseen what was going to happen anyway and profited that way. Yep. Check your conspiracy theories against profitability and economic sense. If they hold up, you've got a good one. Let me know. I'm all for it. I'd love it if the dark forces were behind it. But those dark forces are usually half-wits. Why? Because they're just like us. The CIA are not blamed for very much these days. Mostly, I think, because they've been revealed as bunglers. Howard Hughes very reluctantly agreed to set up a front operation where a Russian submarine had gone down, and the CIA would like to take a look at it. So they asked Howe to set something up. He built the Glomar Explorer, an oceanographic research oil exploration rig. It went out into the ocean, sunk down, got into the sub. He gave the CIA what they found. But the deal was that the story would never get out. Now, you'd think, well, Howard kept his mouth shut. He's good at that, or was. Dead now. But the CIA, sadly, not too good. Even though it's a secret organization, the story got out. And the story always gets out. It's a bit like the moon landings. I think it would be wonderful if the whole thing was staged. But I grew up in that generation. I was a kid in '69, when the first moon landing took place. To think that it was all staged, I would take my hat off to that. Yeah, definitely. If that was a setup, it would be an extraordinary one. In fact, to film it would, well, if you want to do it properly, you better build that Saturn V rocket. And, to make the whole thing look authentic, well, yeah, actually train and send the astronauts there and come back with some rocks. I mean, you could fake that easily enough, I guess, but it wouldn't really look authentic without the Hasselblads on the moon, and the technology at the time looks ancient today. So it would probably not be. Wait a minute, you might as well actually land on the moon. What do you achieve? The US government pocketed the billions for the space program, paid off the 400,000 technicians, and wait a minute, it's costing just as much anyway. Can't quite see where this is going economically. No, once again, I stress, put your conspiracy theory to the economic test. It's a bit like the economics of the future. If the future allows time travel, but the energy cost of it is massive for some reason, probably would be, don't know, having to build kind of your own stars or something to bend enough gravity. But what's the more economic way of doing it? That's right. Get into your mind and make you believe you've time traveled. Make you feel it like it's a solid memory, a solid experience. That's been done in fiction many, many times. But what hasn't been stressed is the economic viability of it. Most things that will be extraordinary will always be tested by the economic value of it, the cost of doing it. Not just in terms of pure money, but in time, effort, and energy. Take all of those things into account, please. It will save you a lot of doubt. You can sweep away most of your doubts by looking closely at the cost.